From the dawn of human storytelling, there are tales meant to inspire, tales meant to warn, and tales meant to terrify. But every so often, there is a story so shocking, so tragic, that it echoes across the centuries, as if it were written not only for the people of the past, but for every generation to come. And among all the myths of Greece, one stands alone in its sheer devastating twist. The story of Oedipus, a man destined to unravel the very fabric of his life. A man whose tragedy is not only the darkest in Greek mythology, but perhaps the most haunting ever told. Imagine a prophecy so horrifying that it forces parents to turn against their own child. A prophecy that says, "Your son will kill his father and marry his mother." In a world where the words of the oracle were believed to be the voice of the gods themselves, there could be no greater curse. This is where the tale begins, in the palace of Thebes, with King Laius and Queen Jocasta trembling before the fate spoken over their newborn son. They thought they could defy destiny. They believed they could outwit the gods. And so, the infant Oedipus was bound by the ankles and left upon a mountainside to die. But fate has a way of weaving its threads in silence. A shepherd, moved by pity, spared the child and carried him away. From there, the boy passed into the hands of another royal family, this time in Corinth, where King Polybus and Queen Merope raised him as their own. He was given the name Oedipus, meaning swollen foot, a faint reminder of the wounds he carried from his abandonment. And so the boy grew to a man, unaware of the bloodline that truly defined him. Years later, when Oedipus had become strong, clever, and beloved, a careless insult pierced his peace. At a banquet, a drunken guest taunted him, whispering that he was not truly the son of Polybus. That single moment of doubt drove Oedipus to the oracle of Delphi, desperate to learn the truth. But the oracle did not speak of his parents. Instead, it delivered the same curse spoken long before. "You are destined to kill your father and marry your mother." The words ignited terror in Oedipus' heart. Believing Polybus and Merope were his parents, he fled Corinth at once, determined to save them from such horror. But by fleeing, he stepped directly into the jaws of the prophecy. For at a narrow crossroads, destiny waited. There, Oedipus encountered a nobleman in a chariot, proud and unyielding, who ordered him aside. Words turned to anger, anger turned to violence, and in the struggle, Oedipus killed the man and his guards. He thought it a chance encounter. In truth, it was the first thread of the prophecy tightening around him. For the man he had slain was Laius, his true father, the king of Thebes. Unaware of the horror he had unleashed, Oedipus continued his journey. But as he neared Thebes, he found the city paralyzed by fear. A monstrous sphinx had seized control, perching upon the road and devouring anyone who failed her riddle. The city cried out for deliverance. Oedipus, fearless and clever, confronted her. When she asked, "What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 in the evening?" he answered with confidence, "Man." Defeated, the Sphinx hurled herself to her death, and Thebes was free. The people hailed Oedipus as a savior. They begged him to be their king. With Laius dead, the throne was vacant, and the widowed queen Jocasta stood beside it. And so Oedipus married her, unaware that she was his mother. He had solved the riddle of the Sphinx, but not the riddle of his own life. For years, peace reigned. Oedipus and Jocasta had children together, sons and daughters, heirs to the throne of Thebes. To the world, it seemed the prophecy had been left behind, buried under triumph and prosperity. But beneath the surface, fate stirred. Thebes was struck by a terrible plague. Crops withered, livestock perished, and death stalked the city streets. Once again, the people turned to Oedipus, their savior king, begging him to uncover the cause of their suffering. The oracle's answer was merciless. The plague will not end until the murderer of Laius is found and punished. Oedipus swore before his people that he would hunt down this criminal, no matter the cost. But the cost was greater than he could ever imagine. The blind prophet Tiresias was summoned, and though reluctant, he spoke the unthinkable. "You are the murderer you seek." Oedipus erupted in rage, convinced the prophet lied, or worse, conspired against him. He accused rivals of treachery, blind to the truth closing in around him. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. A messenger from Corinth brought news. Polybus, whom Oedipus believed to be his father, was dead. Relief surged through Oedipus. If his father had died by natural causes, the prophecy could not be true. But the messenger revealed another truth. Polybus was not his father at all. He had been adopted, found as a babe with pierced and swollen feet. The final witness, the shepherd who had once carried the infant Oedipus from Thebes, was brought forward. Under questioning, he confessed the full story. Oedipus was the child of Laius and Jocasta. The prophecy had not been avoided, it had been fulfilled in every detail. The truth fell upon Oedipus like a thunderclap. He had killed his father. He had married his mother. His children were his siblings. The hero of Thebes was nothing but the puppet of fate, dancing upon strings he had tried so desperately to cut. Jocasta, consumed by horror, fled to her chambers and ended her life. Oedipus, discovering her body, cried out in a grief so raw it shattered him. He seized the golden pins of her dress and drove them into his own eyes, blinding himself. He staggered before the people, a broken figure dripping blood, no longer their king, but the embodiment of cursed destiny. Banished from Thebes, he wandered the land as a beggar, guided only by his loyal daughter Antigone. His fall was absolute, from prince to king, from king to savior, and from savior to exile. His story is the darkest reminder of the Greek belief that no man, no matter how strong or wise, can escape the will of the gods. Yet Oedipus' tale is not just a tragedy frozen in ancient myth. It is a story that has haunted philosophers, poets, and psychologists for centuries. Sophocles made it the crown jewel of Greek tragedy, shaping theater forever. Freud found in it the echoes of unconscious desire and fear, naming the Oedipus complex as a force buried deep in every human psyche. Even today, his name is invoked whenever destiny, choice, and identity collide in ways we cannot explain. The true horror of Oedipus' story is not only that the prophecy came true, it is that every step he took to avoid it led him directly into its grasp. His tragedy is the tragedy of all humanity, the eternal struggle between free will and fate. Can we change the course of our lives, or are we merely walking down a road already written in the stars? Oedipus forces us to stare into that abyss and confront what it means to live under the shadow of destiny. And as the story ripples outward, it does not end with him. His children, cursed by the same bloodline, will carry the weight of his sins. Thebes will continue to writhe under the legacy of his choices. The cycle of tragedy will not stop with Oedipus. It will spread, as all great myths do, from generation to generation, leaving us to wonder how much of our own lives are bound by unseen hands. The tragedy of Oedipus is often told as if it were a single story, a self-contained myth. But in truth, it is part of a much larger cycle of Theban legends that ripple far beyond his own lifetime. To truly grasp the depth of this darkness, we must look at how his fate bled into those around him, poisoning bloodlines, kingdoms, and even the very concept of justice in Greek thought. Consider first the children of Oedipus, not merely offspring, but the very embodiment of a cursed union. Eteocles, Polynices, Antigone, and Ismene were born into a world already fractured by unspeakable sin. Each carried within them the dual weight of legacy and doom. It is here we see how Greek myth transforms one man's tragedy into a generational curse, a theme that haunts countless families in mythology. When the gods mark one life, they often mark the entire house. Eteocles and Polynices, his sons, grew into rivals, locked in a cycle of distrust and ambition. Their battle for the throne of Thebes erupted into civil war, brother against brother, a city torn apart by the echoes of their father's fate. And in perhaps the cruelest irony of all, they met their deaths not at the hands of strangers, but at each other's swords, both slain in the dust, leaving Thebes once again without peace. It was as though the prophecy that had shaped their father now reached into their very souls, twisting their brotherhood into mutual destruction. And then there is Antigone, perhaps the most noble figure to emerge from this shadowed legacy. Her loyalty to her father in exile, her courage to defy the king in order to bury her brother Polynices, made her a symbol of tragic virtue. She inherited her father's suffering, but transformed it into defiance, standing against human law in the name of divine justice. Yet even she could not escape the cruelty of fate. Condemned for her disobedience, she chose death rather than a life stripped of honor. The blood of Oedipus, it seemed, carried within it both tragedy and resilience. But why did the Greeks preserve this story in such relentless detail? Why did they return to it again and again in their dramas and poems? Perhaps it was because Oedipus forced them to confront the limits of human knowledge. Unlike the warriors of Homer, who met their fates on the battlefield, Oedipus' tragedy unfolded through his search for truth. His very intelligence, his determination to uncover secrets, became the instrument of his destruction. In this, the Greeks revealed something profound, that knowledge itself could be dangerous, that to peel back the veil of destiny might not free you, but destroy you. And this raises another question that ripples even into our modern world. Was Oedipus guilty, or merely a victim? He killed his father, yes, but in ignorance. He married his mother, yes, but without intent. Can a man be condemned for crimes he never chose, or does guilt lie not in action, but in the fulfillment of prophecy? The ancient Athenians, obsessed with law, justice, and moral responsibility, wrestled with this question in the theater. Audiences would sit in the open-air amphitheaters, staring at the actor masked as Oedipus, and ask themselves, if he is guilty, then so are we all, for who among us can escape the will of fate? This is why Oedipus' story remains relevant across millennia. It is not just about gods and kings, but about the human condition itself. Every decision we make, every path we take, may carry consequences we cannot see. And yet, like Oedipus, we press forward, driven by the belief that we can master our own destiny. His tragedy is terrifying precisely because it feels so familiar. The myth also forces us to confront the role of prophecy in human life. In the ancient world, oracles were not simply storytellers. They were thought to be the mouthpieces of the divine. The Oracle of Delphi, perched upon her tripod, inhaling the fumes of Apollo's temple, was feared and revered by kings and peasants alike. Her words shaped wars, marriages, journeys, and dynasties. When she spoke to Oedipus, she was not giving him a choice. She was declaring an inevitability. And yet, even as the Greeks feared her, they also wondered, if the future is known, do we truly have free will? Or are we simply walking a path already written? That very tension between fate and freedom echoes through philosophy, theology, and psychology, even today. When Freud looked upon Oedipus, he saw not only a man cursed by the gods, but a mirror into the human soul, into the unconscious desires that lurk beneath civilized life. When modern storytellers craft narratives of heroes who cannot escape their destiny, whether in literature or film, they are drawing from the same ancient well. The name Oedipus lingers because the questions he raises are eternal. And yet, there is one more layer, the gods themselves. The Greeks often left their motives ambiguous. Why did Apollo's oracle deliver such a cruel prophecy? Was it punishment for Laius' earlier sins? Was it simply a cosmic law, indifferent to human suffering? Or did the gods weave this tragedy to remind mortals of their fragility, to show that no matter how high they climbed, they would always remain beneath divine power? The silence of the gods in Oedipus' tale is chilling. Unlike other myths where Zeus thunders or Athena intervenes, here the gods do not act openly. They simply speak through prophecy and allow events to unfold. In many ways, that silence is the most terrifying presence of all, and perhaps that is why Oedipus' name has never faded. His story is not just one of personal downfall, but of humanity's endless struggle to understand its place in the cosmos. He is at once a hero and a cautionary figure, a man who saved a city and destroyed himself in the same breath. To hear his story is to confront not just ancient Greece, but ourselves, our fears, our limits, and the shadows of destiny that follow us all. The saga of Oedipus cannot be confined to the walls of Thebes alone. It stretches across time, culture, and philosophy, evolving with each retelling. The Greeks themselves reshaped the myth depending on who was listening and why. In some versions, Oedipus is not the blind exile wandering in sorrow, but a sacred figure, a kind of hero whose suffering grants him a strange authority even in death. The place where he finally laid down his weary body, Colonus, was said to become holy ground, guarded by the Furies, blessed by the gods, and forever tied to the fate of Athens itself. This curious transformation of a cursed king into a figure of divine significance reveals how the ancients grappled with the paradox of tragedy, that great suffering could give rise to a strange kind of honor. The myth also rippled into politics. Athenian dramatists such as Sophocles did not tell the Oedipus story simply for entertainment. Their audiences were citizens, lawmakers, generals, men who shaped the destiny of the city-state. To watch Oedipus fall was to meditate on the fragility of power. A king who once solved the riddle of the Sphinx and saved his people became the very source of their ruin. It was a warning carved into the heart of Greek political thought. Even the wisest leader could be undone not by enemies abroad, but by forces within. Pride, blindness, fate. The theater was not merely a stage. It was a classroom where Athenians examined their own society through the mirror of myth. And yet, Oedipus was more than a political parable. His story became a meditation on identity itself. In Greek culture, knowing one's lineage, one's ancestry, was essential. To be cut off from that knowledge was to be rootless, a shadow among men. Oedipus, in his relentless pursuit of truth, uncovered the horror that he was both son and husband, father and brother. His identity collapsed under the weight of impossible contradictions. The Greeks asked, if a man does not truly know who he is, can he ever rule wisely, live justly, or even be fully human? That question resonates far beyond the myth, echoing in philosophy, literature, and even psychology centuries later. This obsession with self-knowledge finds its counterpart in the very stones of Greece. At Delphi, carved into the temple of Apollo, were the words, "Know thyself." For Oedipus, this command became a curse. He sought to know, and he discovered truths too unbearable to live with. The audience, however, was forced to confront a chilling paradox. Knowledge is necessary, but knowledge can also destroy. To what extent should we seek truth, when truth might undo us? It is a question that reverberates not just through Greek myth, but through every era where humanity dares to lift the veil of mystery, whether in philosophy, science, or the secrets of the human heart. The myth's reach extended beyond Greece as well. When the Romans adopted Greek culture, they inherited Oedipus too. Latin poets and philosophers retold his tragedy, sometimes softening it, sometimes sharpening its edges. To the Romans, steeped in ideas of family honor and civic duty, the horror of Oedipus' incest and patricide struck deep. It was not only a personal crime, but a crime against the very order of society. Later, as Christianity spread across the ancient world, echoes of Oedipus appeared in moral debates about sin, guilt, and the burden of inherited curses. The story was reshaped to explore the tension between divine justice and human suffering, questions that remain at the center of theological thought even now. In the Middle Ages, Oedipus resurfaced in unexpected ways. His name appeared in sermons, his fate used as a warning of what happens when pride blinds men to God's law. Medieval scholars wrestled with whether his downfall was caused by sin, fate, or the cruelty of the gods. To them, Oedipus represented the danger of relying on human reason alone, cut off from divine guidance. And yet, at the same time, his relentless pursuit of truth appealed to those who sought wisdom in an age when knowledge itself was often feared as dangerous. The Renaissance revived Oedipus once again, this time with a new lens. Humanist thinkers saw in him not just a tragic figure, but a symbol of the human spirit's insatiable hunger to understand. The playwrights of Europe turned his myth into grand tragedies for their own audiences. They emphasized the psychological torment, the family tensions, and the clash between human freedom and divine decree. In this way, Oedipus became a bridge between ancient myth and modern drama, shaping the way we think about theater itself as a place where humanity wrestles with its deepest questions. And then came the modern age, when Freud seized upon the myth and gave it a startling new meaning. For him, Oedipus was not only a king or a tragic hero, he was every man. Freud's theory of the Oedipus complex reimagined the myth as a metaphor for unconscious desires buried in the human psyche. While controversial and debated, Freud's interpretation revealed the lasting power of the story. Across thousands of years, Oedipus remained alive, transformed, reshaped, but always at the center of our attempts to understand who we are and why we suffer. But let us not forget the darker echoes of the myth itself, the unspoken questions left hanging in its shadows. Was Oedipus ever truly free? Could any choice he made have broken the chain of prophecy? Or was he a puppet, his strings pulled by forces too vast to resist? And what of the gods? Were they just, or merely cruel in their silence? These questions are what kept the story alive in every age, because they are questions we still ask. Every society, every generation, wonders how much of life is destiny and how much is choice. And the curse of Oedipus did not die with him. It lingered in the wars of his sons, in the defiance of Antigone, in the collapse of Thebes. His story was a spark that ignited others, each carrying the same tragic weight. In this way, Oedipus was not merely a character in a single play, but the root of an entire tragic lineage, one that stretched across myths, across generations, across cultures, refusing to be silenced. From the very beginning, the tale of Oedipus has unsettled audiences because it forces us to face the most uncomfortable truths about ourselves. It begins with prophecy, a warning spoken long before the king was even born. It winds its way through choices made in fear, in anger, in ignorance, each one leading him closer to the very fate he tried to escape. And it ends in ruin, with a king brought low not by foreign armies, not by treachery, but by the devastating realization of who he truly was. The story has endured for thousands of years because it is more than just the tragedy of a single man. It is a mirror. It reflects our struggle with fate and free, while our hunger for truth and our fear of what truth will reveal. Our pride and our blindness, and our desperate need to understand where we come from and who we really are. The Greeks told this story not only to entertain, but to warn, to question, to hold up a light to the darkest corners of human existence. Across centuries, Oedipus has been many things. To the Athenians, he was a warning to kings and citizens alike. To the Romans and medieval thinkers, he was a symbol of sin and divine justice. To Renaissance humanists, he was a hero of relentless pursuit of truth. To Freud, he became a symbol of the unconscious itself, shaping how we think about psychology and desire. Each age has found something of itself in his story, and in doing so, has kept the myth alive. What makes Oedipus truly unforgettable is the paradox at its heart. He is both guilty and innocent, cursed and blessed, a monster and a martyr. He is the solver of riddles who could not solve the riddle of his own life. He is the king who saved his city, but destroyed it. He is the man who sought truth and found despair. In him, we see the fragility of power, the cruelty of fate, and the resilience of the human spirit all entwined in one life. And so, the legacy of Oedipus is not confined to Thebes or to the dusty scrolls of Greek tragedy. It has seeped into our stories, our psychology, our politics, our understanding of what it means to be human. His shadow falls across every age, reminding us that no matter how advanced, how powerful, or how wise we believe ourselves to be, there are mysteries that can undo us and truths that demand a price. The darkest plot twist in Greek mythology is not simply that Oedipus killed his father and married his mother. The darkest twist is that in his downfall, we recognize ourselves. We too are seekers of truth. We too live between the pull of fate and the freedom of choice. And we too must confront the possibility that the greatest riddles of life may never be solved without cost. The myth endures because it is not just about Oedipus, it is about us. From prophecy to pride, from riddle to ruin, the story of Oedipus reminds us that no one escapes the hand of fate. He was the man who saved his city, yet doomed it. The king who sought truth, yet was blinded by it. His downfall is not just a tale of ancient Greece. It is a mirror, reflecting our own struggle between destiny and choice, knowledge and ignorance, pride and humility. The darkest twist in Greek mythology is not only that Oedipus killed his father and married his mother. The true darkness lies in what his story reveals about us, that we too are seekers of truth, and that truth always demands a price. And so, across time, the shadow of Oedipus still falls upon us. His story endures because it is not only about him, it is about humanity itself.